Hello and good evening, everybody, and tonight is going to be episode 50 of Album Rant. And right now it is the summer solstice. As we all know, it is the longest day of the year, the day of maximum sunlight in the northern hemisphere. And I think that it's a very special occasion, and for that, I'm going to focus my attention tonight on the Madman, as you see right in front of you, the one and only Ozzy Osbourne. And the record that I'm going to review tonight is going to be his second solo record entitled Diary of a Madman, released in 1981. Now, I'm sure by this point in your life, you are familiar with the fact that he is the former lead vocalist for the band Black Sabbath, who, for as all as I am concerned with, absolutely dominated the 70s. And they released a string of 6 very, very classic and important albums in the field of heavy metal. And it ranged from 1970's self-titled debut to 1970's Paranoid, 1971's Master of Reality, 1972's Black Sabbath Volume 4, 1973's Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and then 1975's Sabotage. Excuse me. And they had a string of hits on those albums, such as the Black Sabbath title track, The Wizard, NIB, War Pigs, Paranoid, Iron Man, Fairies Wear Boots, Sweet Leaf, Children of the Grave, Into the Void, Wheels of Confusion, Tomorrow's Dream, Snowblind, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, Killing Yourself to Live, A National Acrobat, Symptom of the Universe, Hole in the Sky, and others among that. And these guys were basically considered to be the very first heavy metal band. Now, I'm not exactly sure if that's a true, accurate statement, but many are saying that, so that's out there. However, unfortunately, in 1976, they released a very, in my opinion, lackluster album entitled Technical Ecstasy. And I just don't know what it was with that one. I think it's mostly the songwriting that I have a big problem with, but something just seemed off about it. It just seemed not fully there, and a lot of other people really share my opinion, and apparently Ozzy was very much sinking into hardcore drug usage. I mean, the entire band, they were pretty big cokeheads, but apparently, according to what I have heard, no one was as bad as Ozzy Osbourne, and that is really, really saying something. So he was fired after Technical Ecstasy, although he came back in 1978 for their 8th studio release entitled Never Say Die, which I thought was better than Technical Ecstasy, but not as good as those first 6. I mean, there still were some decent tracks from there, like the title track, A Hard Road, Johnny Blade, Junior's Eyes, and others. But apparently the reunion, or the quote-unquote reunion with Ozzy, wasn't really sitting right with the band, and Ozzy left again. And he decided to pursue a solo career while Black Sabbath recruited another lead vocalist by the name of Ronnie James Dio. But Ozzy released his very first solo record in the year 1980 entitled Blizzard of Oz. And I have reviewed that on this channel. If you maybe want to check out that episode, it was one of my earlier ones, but I forget what number it was. But it's there. It's on this channel, I promise you. And he recruited some more members for this solo album. He had Randy Rhoads, formerly from Quiet Riot, on lead guitar. He had Bob Daisley, who was just getting out of a stint with Rainbow. on the bass guitar, and he had Lee Kerslake of Uriah Heep on the drums, and man, that's a phenomenal lineup. And Blizzard of Oz was an absolute hit. It had songs such as I Don't Know, Goodbye to Romance, Suicide Solution, Mr. Crowley, and of course, that song that we've all heard and we are kind of sick of hearing, Crazy Train. Yeah, we got it. So anyways, they released a hit record in 1980. And the question on everyone's mind was, well, could they repeat the success of Blizzard of Oz? And that brings me to the subject of tonight's review, 1981's Diary of a Madman. This is his 10th album overall, his second studio album. Now, of course, those first 8 were obviously the ones he did with Black Sabbath. So anyways, we have the cover right there, and man, that's a heck of a cover right there. It looks absolutely crazy. Seems fitting. We can see right there, we have Ozzy doing some kind of weird little pose right there. I'm not quite sure what he's in. It looks like a castle of some sort. And yes, you have the old inverted cross there in the background. Got to have that thing. So let's go ahead and see what we have here on the inside. So, as you can see right here, we have some song lyrics for all of the tracks, and I'm going to get to that in a second. And I'm not quite sure what we have down there. Looks like it's written some kind of foreign language or something. I don't know, but maybe somebody out there can enlighten me. And then we're gonna flip over here, and we have a picture of the band, and we have the lineup right here. We have Ozzy Osbourne on lead vocals, the late, unfortunately, Randy Rhoads on guitar, Rudy Sarzo on bass, and Tommy Aldridge on the drums. Well, here's the thing. If you listen to this record, and I have listened to it many times, the bass does not sound anything like Rudy Sarzo. The drums sound absolutely nothing like Tommy Aldridge. That's because they were not actually the bass player and the drummer on this album. It was actually still Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake, believe it or not. They were going through some legal troubles at the time, and Bob and Lee were kicked out of the band, and there was some never-ending lawsuits over royalties for their performances on this album and Blizzard of Oz. And on the initial pressing of this album, because of all that, I think this move came from Sharon of all people. Well, actually, that seems fitting. Lee and Bob, they were removed from the credits, and they were replaced with the members who at the time had replaced them. And I'm telling you right now, Rudy and Tommy did not play on this album. It is all Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake, so I got to get that right out of the way right there and make sure that is established. So that's the inside, so let's go ahead and see what we have here on the back. This thing's not going in. Got it? Yeah. So, back there we have another picture of Ozzy in the castle, being crazy as always. And then we have the track list right there. And the very first time I heard this album was actually in the car with someone, and I was absolutely blown away by it. And I have loved this album ever since the year 2001, I want to say. And man, that's been a long time. 23 years, believe it or not. But it kicks off with Over the Mountain, which is one of his most well-known tracks. It has a nice little drum intro from Lee, and it's kind of slow, it's kind of brooding, but it's also really, really incredible. And I have heard varying stories about who was the actual mastermind behind this track. It's credited to all 4 members of the band, Ozzy, Randy, Bob, and Lee. In the insert to the Ozman Cometh Greatest Hits compilation, Ozzy says that Randy was the main inspiration behind this track because the rest of the band was off getting stoned, which I'm not surprised at. But apparently, according to Lee Kerslake, he and Bob were the main masterminds behind Over the Mountain. So I'm not really sure who to believe, but I will say this. I think if the story is coming from Ozzy, we should question the validity of it. But again, it's very, very slow, but again, I really like it. It's got a very nice rhythm to it, and it's one of my favorite songs by Ozzy Osbourne. And I mean, the lyrics are pretty bizarre if you actually pay attention to them. But I heard them tell me that this land of dreams was now. I told them I had ridden shooting stars and said I'd show them how. Man, that's crazy, but awesome at the same time. And yes, there's a guitar solo in the middle, and it's absolutely incredible. But Over the Mountain, I definitely give that my endorsement. Then we move to Flying High Again, which also apparently Lee Kerslake was the main songwriter for this one, but I'm not really sure who to believe here, but that's what he says apparently. This one is a little bit more faster, but it's incredibly stonery, and if that makes sense, but it definitely sounds like whoever wrote it was baked at the time. But it's another classic Ozzy Osbourne song. Mama's gonna worry, I've been a bad, bad boy. Yeah, absolutely love it. And this one is commonly performed in concert. It's on the majority of his live albums, and it's an absolute hit. Again, another very, very momentous guitar solo in the middle. Randy is absolutely on fire on this album, and I absolutely love it. And that's another, like I said, classic Ozzy Osbourne song. Then we move to the third song, which is You Can't Kill Rock and Roll. And I think I mentioned this on a previous episode, but it seems like, at least from my perspective, that he really, really loved to make his third song on every album to be a ballad. Not all the albums, but it seems like it happens on a lot of them. And well, Diary of a Madman is no exception, and You Can't Kill Rock and Roll would be the obligatory ballad for this album. But it starts out with an acoustic intro and some nice, needlework guitar from Randy, and man, the guy was a legend, and it's a shame he left us so soon. And on the previous album, Goodbye to Romance was the ballad that was the third track. Just this time it's You Can't Kill Rock and Roll. And I actually think I like this better than Goodbye to Romance. I always thought Goodbye to Romance was kind of whiny. This one doesn't really seem to be that way, and it's really got more of an emotional kick to it, especially during the chorus. Like, you feel like this guy has something to say and a stance to make, and boy is he making it. And the fact that it's kind of a ballad, it actually kind of works. But again, it concludes with a pretty extensive guitar solo by Randy, and I think it works incredibly well. So yeah, this is definitely one of the slower songs. It's definitely one of the softer songs, but it's absolutely incredible. But then things pick right back up with the fourth track entitled Believer. And it starts out with a nice bass intro. And then things progressively pick back in, and it's kind of like Over the Mountain in the sense that it's more brooding and maybe not be very fast, but I think it works pretty well. Sometimes when songs kind of go a little bit slower, they can tend to get a little bit whiny in some places. I don't think Believer really does that. And it's a pretty good doomy anthem, if that's a thing. But yeah, I really love Believer. The chorus, you've got to believe in yourself because no one will believe in you. Love it. I'm a believer, I ain't no deceiver, mountains move before my eyes. God, I love these lyrics. But in all honesty, if I have to pick a favorite from side one, I am probably going to go with Over the Mountain. It's just such a classic song, and everything about it just clicks. But this album is definitely very, very front-loaded. I love every single song from side one, but Over the Mountain is probably going to be my favorite. So then we move on to side number two. And unfortunately, This side is not quite as strong as the first one, but it's still very, very impressive. Kicks off with Little Dolls, which also has a nice drum intro from Lee, and it goes and again it's slow, but I think it really works, aside from the fact that it's slow. But the rhythm, I really got to hand it to that. The rhythm really grips me, and I really do enjoy Little Dolls. Maybe not as much as what came before it, but I still think it's a definite classic. And a very criminally underrated Ozzy Osbourne song. Like, I never really hear too many people talking about Little Dolls, and it's a shame because it's great. But I mean, these lyrics, it sounds like some voodoo crap. It's pretty awesome, but albeit disturbing at the same time. Withering and screaming, the pain just won't go. He'll show you no mercy. The image in his hands, it's useless to try, escaping his curse. The pins and needles prick the skin of little dolls. Nowhere to run, your fate is in his hands. Your time has come, you'll live to his command. I'm warning you, the worst is yet to come. The killer who remains a mystery. Wow. That's pretty messed up, but at the same time, it's pretty awesome, and I do recommend Little Dolls. Then we come to Tonight, which I think is the weakest song on here, unfortunately. This one's a little bit slower, but it's also a lot softer. I mean, a lot of these songs are kind of soft and brooding. Well, they're brooding, but I wouldn't quite call them soft, but this one is a little bit too soft for my taste. And the chorus, I don't really quite dig the chorus. It's going, tonight, tonight, and it sounds a little too whiny for my taste, and I think that is probably going to end up being the weakest song off this album. It's not a bad song. Let me just make that very, very clear. But compared to everything else, I really think it probably would rank 8th out of 8. Then we come to Sato, or S-A-T-O. And there's an urban legend out there that it stands for Satan and the Occult. And I am pretty sure that is not true. So we're just going to get that right out of the way. That is not what it stands for. I am not fully sure what it stands for, but it does not stand for Satan and the Occult. So there we have that. As for the song itself, it's pretty upbeat. It's pretty fast. It's still a little bit more forgettable than some of the other stuff that's on this album. But I mean, it's still a very, very solid track. But it starts out and it's got a very, very slow intro, I guess you would say. I mean, there's this big bombastic intro, then it kind of mellows out for a bit, and then it starts picking up, and it's pretty fast all the way throughout. And for that, I really, really like it. But I can't conceal it till you know, like I knew I did before. I gotta tell you now, the ship is ready, waiting on the shore. Yeah. Didn't really do a very good job there, but I did my best, so what can you do? But then it concludes with the epic title track, Diary of a Madman. And this definitely has some Revelation Mother Earth vibes, but this is a lot better than Revelation Mother Earth. Starts out very definite acoustic intro, but then things start kicking in and this just gets absolutely insane. Then Ozzy comes in for a little bit, and there's not much instrumentation when he's doing the verses, but after he does the verses and the band starts coming in, it once again picks up that insanity, and it's absolutely incredible. Then we slip into the interlude. Again, it's very, very acoustically driven, but it's got some keyboards in the background that just really, really set the very eerie mood of this thing, and it just blows me away. I gotta tell you, it's an incredible song. Then we once again get one more verse, and it finally explodes at the end, and we've got this choir, it sounds like, in the background, just doing all kinds of insane vocalization, and it's just incredible. It ends with absolute pure insanity, and I love every second of it. And the title track is most definitely my favorite song from side 2, and it's probably my favorite song from the entire album. And for that, I definitely do recommend Diary of a Madman. Again, favorite from side 1 is probably Over the Mountain. Favorite from side 2 is most definitely the title track. And that is going to conclude my review tonight of Diary of a Madman by Ozzy Osbourne. Now, unfortunately, this would be the very last album with this lineup. I believe shortly after this, Lee Kerslake went back to Uriah Heep. I know he was with them at least at some points during the 80s, so we have that at least. Bob Daisley stuck around every now and then, but I don't think he really toured with him too much. And Randy, unfortunately, passed away shortly after this album was released, and I believe he died in a plane crash, and it's very, very tragic. And Ozzy did have some great guitarists with him after this, but unfortunately, none of them really quite matched the heights that Randy took this band to, and it really is a shame we lost him way too early. But anyways, next week I will be back with an album ranking, assuming I don't get sick again. But until then, have a very pleasant evening.